What's up, guys, and welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. Today's video is all about how to write a rhetorical analysis essay. So these are my best tips to help you succeed on the AP-Lang exam. Rhetoric is the use of language to manipulate or persuade. So for question 2 of the AP-Lang exam, the rhetorical analysis question, you are going to be presented with a passage. It can be a letter, a speech, an article, or even an excerpt of a nonfiction novel. And you need to be looking at how the author or speaker tailors his or her message to his or her audience. So to do this, remember either Soapstone or Space Cat. Now, personally, my students prefer Soapstone. However, Space Cat works just as well. But these are things that you are sometimes given in the prompt itself, but also they're things that you would want to include in your introduction paragraph. Recent AP-Lang prompts have used the phrase rhetorical choices instead of rhetorical strategies. In fact, sometimes it doesn't say rhetorical choices at all. It simply says how, and that word is usually italicized. So here are some general rhetorical strategies that seem to come up quite frequently. You also should look into the modes of discourse or modes of rhetoric and the appeals. I would be a bit cautious about the appeals though, because students sometimes tend to overuse them. So yes, they're in multiple pieces, but it doesn't mean that they need to be the first thing that you analyze. So the next thing that you need to do is actually approach the passage. And to do this, you need to annotate effectively. And so one thing that I encourage students to do is to always have a pen in hand, because yes, you do write your essay in pen on the AP-Lang exam, and take your annotations in the margins. If you struggle to understand a passage, or perhaps you're just worried that you're going to zone out or forget, take a little bullet point note at the end of each paragraph to make sure that you're understanding what's going on. After you've annotated, you're going to want to divide the passage into sections. Students tend to divide the text into either 3 or 4 sections. Think about the beginning, the middle, and the end. Another tip for you guys is, if time permits, to try to read the passage twice, because oftentimes when you're under pressure, you miss things the first go around, and once you've read the whole passage and you know what it's talking about, then you can go back and look for more of the nuances within the text. Another thing to do would be to choose your main points, and I'm going to suggest that you do this before you actually write your thesis. That way you have a stronger thesis and you know what you're going to talk about in your essay. When you divide the passage into sections, you're probably going to notice that there are multiple strategies working together within a section. This is actually a good thing because it can help you expand your analysis. So what I've done here is I've created a chart. This is not entirely inclusive by any means, but it has the modes of rhetoric or discourse and also some strategies that are usually present when that particular mode is being used. So this will just kind of help you look for different things working together. That way you can make a stronger analysis, and also that way you can create layers of evidence and commentary within a body paragraph. Let's look at an example of what happens when you've divided the text into sections and then chosen your main points. So I'm going to be using the Florence Kelly prompt as an example, and my first paragraph is going to be about how she establishes her argument. So I've listed a few strategies here that I noticed in that particular section. That's what I would write about. Then I'm going to move on to section 2, which for me would be body paragraph 2. And in this particular section, she is developing or furthering her argument, so she's going to be using some different strategies. Now, you'll notice I listed juxtaposition twice. That's because she used it in 2 different ways, so that rather than writing an entire paragraph about juxtaposition, I'm going to analyze the passage chronologically, which brings me to my third body paragraph and third section, and that is the call to action. So this is really common. A lot of speeches and letters end with a call to action, and it ties into purpose. So it's really important that you analyze the call to action. Sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's implied. Now that you have your main points, you can go and write a defensible thesis. So I'm going to show you guys 2 examples here. The top one is more of a simple noun-based thesis, whereas the bottom one is more active. I prefer the bottom one, but you could do either. I have several videos about defensible thesis statements on my channel, so I encourage you to check them out if you're looking for some more tips. Now let's talk about selecting evidence, because with the new rubric, you get up to 4 points for evidence and commentary. So you're going to want to include some evidence in each of your body paragraphs. Evidence can be done in the form of a direct quote or a paraphrase. One thing that students need to remember, though, is that you want to embed the evidence into a sentence of your own. You don't want to just drop a big sentence in there, because if it's not your own words, if it's from the passage, it doesn't read the same. So you can use a single word in quotes, you can use phrases, but you want to make sure it reads well. You also want to make sure that you're following up your evidence with commentary. Now, this is the thing that I think students find the most difficult about a rhetorical analysis, is what do I actually say? So I've given you guys a couple tips here, but the most important thing is to analyze why and how. Why does the author use this strategy? How does it affect the audience? So here are just a couple teacher tips. I would recommend including more commentary than evidence, just because that helps the flow of your paper and it's going to help you get a higher score. You also want to layer your evidence and commentary within a paragraph. So how can you actually practice this? Well, if you're doing this outside of class, One thing I would recommend is to review the samples from College Board. If you're looking at the new samples, I would look at anything that scored a 4 out of 6 or higher, but if it's the old samples, look at anything that was a 6 out of 9 or higher. A 5 used to be passing, but I don't think a 5 out of 9 is automatically going to be a 4 out of 6 on this new exam, so I would recommend at least a 6 out of 9 if you're looking at old samples. You can also highlight or you can underline evidence if you can print out these samples. I would look at how the higher samples develop their evidence and commentary. That way you can start to understand the flow of a strong essay. If you guys are looking for additional help with a rhetorical analysis essay, I will link a playlist here so you can see all my other rhetorical analysis videos. And also, guys, if you find this kind of content helpful, please don't forget to click subscribe, turn your notifications on, and leave me a comment below if you have any upcoming video requests. Until next time, guys, happy writing!